this video, I'm getting even closer to finishing up my bathroom remodel. I'll put a link in the above here in the description too for that playlist that shows all the different parts. But for this, I made this custom vanity out of quarter sawn oak to give that nice, more modern pattern than oak, and then show you how I finished it. Actually, the video took longer than I expected, so I'm going to break it up into two parts. And I'll add a link to the second part. The first part, I'm going to show how I built this. So there has, I actually had to go around the piping in the back there, but just get enough space just because the bowl is so deep. But showing how to, build this face frame. It's all out of plywood. Actually finished, there's a little bit of a gap, like a 4-inch gap on the side. So I finished the sides with a veneer, soft close hinges. But again, I'll show you all this. And then again, in the second video, I'll show how I mounted it. Gave it a nice finish like this. So I put in the description some tools I used. Actually, to use quite a bit of tools because this is all one custom piece, or that was glued together boards, and then I cut it into 4 pieces that would have this continuous grain pattern. So take a look. Just write in the comments any questions you have, or things you saw I could maybe do a little bit better. So I started off designing the vanity like I'm making. So this is really just the shell of it that I'm making out of plywood. I do a little bit more where I put the face frame, but I wanted to kind of look at the shape, make sure I had it all straight so I could have a cut list and then what to buy. And so here's the face frame. This is going to be actual oak. That's going to be, this is the nicer version of it that's going to cover the front. So I have, just make sure I get, I know where everything's going to fit, what to get. And then here's like I said, the plywood pieces, like the extra support pieces. Again, just designing it so I know what to cut, what to go buy. So I started off, after I got the plywood, this is just 3/4 inch. I think I got a little bit nicer. I mean, you're probably never going to see it, but just to make it a little bit nicer. So I'm cutting out the bottom here just to start off with. That was the biggest piece that I needed to cut. And then just using the track saw because it made the nicest, easiest cut right across it. And so I'm going to do this first, and then if you may not have seen it, but if you can go back possibly, what I did was dado some of the edges so that they fit a little bit better. So I'm going to do that later. And the first what I'm doing here is I'm going to use a French cleat design, and I'll talk about it a little bit more, show it. But what it is so I'm cutting at a 45-degree angle here. So the one side will be the part of the actual vanity, and the other piece will be mounted to the wall. So when they sit together, they overlap, and it actually pinches down against the wall, and it holds. So the piece that I'm holding right now would be mounted to the wall, and then the other piece on the left-hand side, as I fumble around trying to get it here, would be the actual part of the frame of the top part. And if you can kind of imagine, it sits on there and falls down, and then to the left side is where it pinches against the wall. So as the more weight, the more it pushes down. As you hear I mentioned, so I'm going to be dadoing out just a 1/4 inch, I think it was, on each side, or for the vertical dividers, just to get a little bit more surface area. So it's just not just a standard butt joint. And this was just the easiest way. I marked it off with a line, so I knew what to do. And then I'm just gonna do several cuts, just over and over cuts, just making a dado. This was the quickest because I had the saw already out. It's not exactly fun, just repeating, especially with this thin curved blade. But it was it wasn't too bad. So I did the middle here, and then the 2 sides are going to be dadoed as well. Just showing you, so this would be the vertical divider that goes in there. I'm not going to show it on the side, but I did that, and then just since it's not a flat bottom blade, just quick sanding, and it all worked out. So here's I think this is the side piece that's going to sit on there. And then here's a view just showing how it's sitting up. This would be the full divider. But what I'm showing here is just need to pay attention, make sure that the front edge is going to be flush, but on the back edge there's going to be a support. So I needed to cut it about 3/4 of an inch short so that it would sit there. So like the back support in the corner, and then also the cleat. And here it is. I just kind of dry fitting together, make sure it works correctly. There's a top piece. This is actually the back. So you saw that 3/4 inch gap where the French cleat's going to sit on the bottom, and then there's one that's going to be on the bottom as well, just an extra support. One thing I noticed when I started looking at the vanity top is that where the holes go for the faucet are actually going to go right there. Unfortunately, it wasn't a big deal, but good thing that's always a dry fit it, make sure it all fits before you get it all together. So I had to just kind of notch it out a little bit, but still plenty of support. And then one other thing I noticed is that the inside of the vanity top is concave, or so that I would have to I'm going to put a little support piece in there, so it would hit on the sides, but the middle part, since it's not hitting the edge, needs a little extra support. So here's after I glued it together. That top piece is actually the French cleat, and I screwed it all together here. Here I'm kind of showing how it's there's a recess here, so I'm going to put a piece there so it would be able to sit and have some support in the middle instead of having it doesn't flex or break. Maybe it's strong enough, but it wasn't that hard to do. So here it is, testing it out, making sure it all fits in there. It looks like I got the right overhang. Here's the piece, you can kind of see where a gap right there. That's what I was saying. So I'm going to put a piece in there and then give it some support in the middle. And then in the back is where I notched it out, so you can see there. I needed enough to get the faucet in there, and also there's screws if you ever put a faucet in. You can see that. So next I started working on was the drawer fronts. So I got all my pieces, kind of rough cut them. Because what I'm going to do is glue them together into one large panel so that I can have a continuous grain structure, and I'm going to cut it into 4 pieces. The top drawers are going to be fake drawers. They're just because there's no drawer there because there's a sink of the bowl. But you can see they're all not straight, kind of bowed in it, so I had to mill them down a little bit. So that's the face, and then, the front drawer front, and then these smaller pieces. It's all out of the same oak. But I'm cutting this is the face frame, so I said rough cutting it, and then I put it through the planer here. It has a jointer on top, but I have trouble with it getting a really nice jointed edge just because the face is not, or the top surface is not as big as a regular jointer, so I usually end up doing it on the table, so I found it a little bit easier, but it's great for face planing. And also, so from a little bit smaller pieces, but I said that actual drawer faces are like 5 feet. It's a little over 5 feet, and so I use a pencil here, just kind of same thing with the sanding. You kind of put pencil marks on there, then run it through, and you can see if there's any pencil marks. You can tell that it's still not flat. So here I am showing how I edge joint. So I have the large level on the one side, and so it's keeping that side square against the fence, so that, because if it was bowed and you pushed it across the fence, it would actually follow the contour. But this way, as long as you keep it moving at the same pace as the piece of wood, you're going to get a straight cut. And now I have a completely square cut. And I can then flip it over and then make the other side square and parallel, but I didn't need to. The piece I have is a little bit larger than 2 smaller pieces that I need. So that's all I'm doing here, is making a single cut. You can see there's a big knot in that piece of wood, but I'm going to be able to cut it off. So this is, again, the face frame, the different pieces. So one cut, and then I'll cut the smaller pieces, double check. Yep, that's the right side. Let me run this through again. So you can see I'm still always referencing that straight square edge. And then you kind of notice here as I get close to the knot, I cut it out. There's a little bit left over, but I'm going to put it on the back side of the face frame. That's going to be up near the vanity top, so you'll never see it. And so I got my the rails and the stiles all cut up here. Using the domino, showed it plenty more times before, making that little notch for the piece of wood that's going to hold it together, just help it align. So I got all those pieces together, glue them up. So this face frame is going to have 4 holes in it, as if there were 4 drawers. Again, mentioned that the top part is just going to be a cover, so like a fake drawer front, but the bottom will be actual drawers. And I think I actually have to do that in the next video because it was a bit of work. So you can see just assembling here took a little bit of work to get some of the pieces in the middle here all attached, extra glue everywhere. But I got it eventually together and then clamped it all together. Obviously make sure it's square so you don't end up with some piece that you're having to fix or throw away. I didn't have a long enough clamp here, so I took a couple of my 4-foot clamps and put them together. And once I got those done, here's the Festool domino. This is why I'm actually making that front panel, and I was just showing so I've already milled these, already cut these to rough length, and then I'm just going to glue them all together here. I got these nice Rockford panel clamps that's going to hold them together and help it. But I cut them all up, lined them up, made all the dado cuts here, the dominoes, and so I'm going to make this, again, one big panel that's going to get cut up, but it'll keep that nice pattern, so you don't have 4 different drawers with all different grains on them. So I found is using parallel clamp, it's a little bit easier because there's a lot of friction when you start pushing 6 or 7 dominoes together. So I just kind of work it from one side to the other before I put the final clamp in there and put them into these panel clamps. But it's just a little bit of effort, like I said, pushing the glue, pushing across these dominoes. And so here I finally got it in there after I got them all together, and then use this panel clamp, clamped it all together, and then clamp down the edges just to make sure they don't, there's not bowing or they're separating it all, just a little bit extra. The dominoes hold it in place, but it's good enough. And then the middle may be unnecessary, but just put some clamps on the top and the bottom just to make sure it doesn't bow in strange directions with uneven pressure. And once I got it, left it overnight to dry with the glue, ended up with not too bad glue squeeze out here. Just scrape it off a little bit. I'm gonna have to go through and just sand it all anyways, but it makes it a little bit easier just to scrape off those chunks. And this is oak, so it's really hard, so I really wasn't worried about scratching it. And then just go through the normal pattern of, actually I started off I think with the 80s just to kind of get down pretty flat, and then to 120 all the way up to 180. So that way I can do the finish. And then just like when I was doing the planing, I use a pencil and just draw all over it. So as I'm sanding, I can see, make sure I'm doing a smooth pattern and not wearing it down too much in one place other than the other. You can just watch the pencil marks as it goes away. So here I'm done with the first kind of sanding of it, or I think I may have done a couple. I'm not going to show all of it because it's pretty boring, but I water pop in between each of the sanding layers. So I'm just kind of try to get it off. I'm not really sure why I'm hitting it here, but doing that. And then just kind of using a damp rag here just to kind of pop the grain before I sand it down so I don't end up, so it doesn't pop when I do the finish. It's nice, you can start seeing the pattern a little bit. And then after the final, sanding, water pop and everything, I just use this Rubio Monocoat cleaner, which is really just mineral spirits. And then just make sure I get the last bit of the sawdust off. This is the first time, I don't normally do this, but I end up doing grain filler just because the grain, I did a lot of testing on how the grain or how the stain looks on the grain, picking different ones. So I ended up doing that. So this was somewhat of an unnecessary step because I had to grain fill and then resand everything down. But I'll show that in a further step. But it was good to at least start seeing the pattern here. Make sure, the way I lined it up, it was correct. And then up for the sides, I'm going to put a veneer them with this white oak veneer. You can't see it, but it's about 3. You'll see it when I get to it. It's about a 3-inch gap on either side, so it's somewhat visible. Because this was an odd wall, it was like 66 inches, and all the vanities were 60 inches. So I just, cover up those screw holes and everything, just make it look nice. So I just cut it just slightly larger than, I think one side was even bigger than it, and then I'm going to glue it down with contact cement. And then I'll come back with a trim router or trim bit on a router and just flush the edges off. So if you've never used contact cement, you put both sides, let it dry till it's tacky. The same thing on here. I think I had to do a couple layers actually because the wood was soaking it up, but I got it all in there. And then I'm going to use sticks in between just so that just to try to line it up so it doesn't get stuck, because once it touches you're not getting it apart, and it does not stick to, or contact cement generally doesn't stick real hard to things that don't have the contact cement on there, so it might be a little bit tacky to the wood, those wood sticks, but it wasn't actually sticking to them. Just enough where I can line it up and then use the roller and get it all smooth, and then pull out each one of those sticks sequentially and just kind of avoid any bubbles, any uneven patterns, anything like that. Just makes for a nice finish. And here, as mentioned, I'll put the I think this is a combination compression bit, but it's got a little bearing that'll run along the frame on the bottom, and then it'll just trim this veneer off really nice. Most of this veneer, the edges are going to be covered or be in an inaccessible location, so not really necessary, but it is perfect for even visible areas. So you can see, makes a nice smooth cut, and as soon as I just brush it off a little bit, it makes a nice square, clean edge. Give it a little bit closer. So when I finish all the corners, all the sides, you can see it makes it a nice finish. Makes it look like it's solid wood there, but it's just veneered. So I get the strength of the plywood with a nice finish of this white oak, and once you get a finish, stain it, you'll see a nice grain, so you can see just that real thin layer of veneer on the top there. And then I use pocket holes to attach the frame or the carcass to that face frame, which is the white oak, nice wood. And then just what I decided to do was pre-hole or pre-drill, and then put the screws in there, make so that when I go to actually install it, everything's cut out. The holes are already lined. I don't need to try to screw in and hold things that are sitting vertical. So here's once I got it done, just to give you an example, or just showing how there's the veneered side that I just put on, and then this front is that white oak. And so this will be what you'll see. You don't see a whole lot of it because the drawer fronts will be in there, but this is the visible portion, and then like I said, all that whole inside. And here comes the scary part. So I went back to, this is going to be my 4 drawers that are going to be covering the front, and I made it into that one large panel, and then I have to make one cut up the middle, and then one cut along the large length, or the longest length, and then it'll give me the 4 pieces that are my 4 drawer fronts. I made sure that when I cut the dominoes that I measured before, so that I didn't accidentally cut through them. This is a little scary too, because my track didn't span the whole length, so I actually had to cut it most of the way and then readjust it. But track saw's very nice for making these nice perfect cuts, and I think I could even sand it off a little bit, but I was able to then go through, finish this last cut. I was very scared because if I mess this up, the whole thing was done. I have to start over. But you can see, so now you see I can, once I separate it into those 4 pieces, this is how it'll look. Obviously not as big of a gap, but this is how it'll look. This is the front there. And then I'm going to use an 1/8 inch gap, so I just actually use these spacers from tiles. But you can see how the grain continues, obviously, because it was one big piece. So this is what the look I was looking for, just kind of testing it out. And I think I had it attached here to the face frame, and then I went back and pre-drilled the holes just to make sure that when I go to attach it, they're already there. Just make it a lot easier. So you can see that this top pieces, the 2 on the top will be attached permanently just because they're fake, and then the bottom will be actual drawers. And I put some other pieces in here just to be the support. That's what I'm going to drill through and attach. So here, as I mentioned before, I'm going to use this grain filler because I did a lot of testing on the stain, and it was really coming out a little bit blotchy because there's little holes all throughout the grain on this oak. And what I found was, or I actually watched people that make musical instruments and things, and they actually use this. So it makes a real nice smooth finish, and also covers it up. So you put this through, run it across the grain, and then finally with the grain just to get off the excess, and then you just go through and sand it down. Makes a nice smooth finish, and the stain is a lot more consistent across the grain, and in case there's any holes or anything. So I took the drawer fronts off, and then now I'm going to finish it. I'm actually using Danish oil this time. Like I mentioned, I tried a lot. I usually use Rubio Monocoat. It was looking a little bit red on this, and I just didn't like the color. And this Danish oil I really liked. It takes a little bit more work because I got to put this on there, and then polyurethane. But I really liked the finish. You'll notice those odd color ones, strips in the middle. Those are going to be covered up. That's the backer that holds that fake drawer front. You can see it's different color. That was all my testing here, but. Again, I'm just finishing the parts that are going to be mostly visible. So the sides, the bottoms, as the drawers will pull out, would be visible, and any of those cross pieces. But it was also just a good test. So the way you put it on there is kind of like Rubio, except you put a 1 coat. You're really supposed to flood it, but I had enough on there. And then you wait for it to dry a little bit, put a 2nd coat, let that dry, and then you come back, and then you just take off the excess that didn't soak into the wood. So that's all I'm doing here, is just get every last bit of it so that it's completely dry, and then you let it dry overnight. Or I think it may take a couple days. So like I said, it's a little bit more work, but I really like the pattern or the color a little bit better for this project. So I use the same thing on the side, so you can see a little bit better here. Here's that veneered white oak. So I went through and finished this, and it came out looking really good. Really made the grain pop. So this is the last piece for this video. Just like as I mentioned, it took a lot of work just to get to this point. The next one, I'll be mounting it and doing the last bit. So a little bit of a teaser here, just showing how I had it temporarily sat there. And then here's the French cleat. You can see it up against the wall as part of the frame. And then this part, that's the part of the carcass. And then this part is the one that's going to be actually attached to the wall. So when it's attached there, the weight sits on that and pulls against the wall, and it's very secure.